Hello and welcome to Adventures with ADHD, where each week we shine the spotlight on a fabulous ADHDer. This week I have Shelley Farnham with me. Thanks for being my guest this week, Shelley.
Thanks very much for having me, Susie. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you. So Shelley, I'm just going to go straight in with the questions and we'll see what happens, okay?
Yeah.
So first of all, tell me a bit about where you're from and what you do for work.
So I live in Ponteland in Northumberland, very far north, near Newcastle upon Tyne. And for work, I'm a tutor for primary age children for maths and English, as well as I run a community interest company which supports parents and young people around neurodivergence and mental well-being. So that's what I do.
Great. Right. So we've got the right person then. So what led you to your, I think it's a recent diagnosis, is it?
Yeah, it is very recent. It was back in February that I was diagnosed. And the strange thing is that my son, who's now 16, he has a diagnosis of ADHD and autism. And he had his diagnosis back in, when he was 11, so a good 5 years ago. But really, I had been kind of on that path of learning about different neurodivergences and kind of trying to understand more since the time that he was about 6 or 7. So it's been a really long time that I've kind of been learning about it. In all honesty, it didn't strike me at any point up until about a year and a half ago that some of the difficulties that I was experiencing may be neurodivergent difficulties. Honestly, I know it sounds ridiculous when you're learning about it and your child is diagnosed, but I really didn't relate what was going on for him to what was going on for me. And now that I have the diagnosis and I look back on it, in my mind, it looks so obvious, but, I just didn't have that insight then. And I think, obviously, there's a lot of research that says that it presents differently in girls and boys. And, I did have some mental health difficulties kind of, late teens, 20s, 30s, 40s and ongoing. But I never put it down to neurodivergence and kind of struggling to fit in certain instances, never feeling like I quite got it the way other people did, and just always feeling a bit different to everybody else. I had quite a lot of social anxiety growing up, and that still crops up again, now and again. And there was a lot about that. And when I look back on it, all those years that I spent masking, obviously teenage years, even younger than that, obviously, but, even through work, and then, when I became a mom and all of that, you just realize what a toll that masking takes on your mental health. And then not even to really have the insight over the past 10 years. And it was really only when I got to know more neurodivergent women, kind of the women who were being late diagnosed. And I kind of got speaking to them, and something kind of registered in me. And then a couple of them said to me, the difficulties that you're having, it could be ADHD. And in the beginning, I was kind of, no, definitely not. But the more I saw and the more I got to know them, and the more I ran my own business as well, I think that gives you a very different perspective on yourself as to when you're actually employed, because a lot of the structure's taken away. You have to organize yourself differently. You have to prioritize tasks. And I think that really, things started to unravel a little bit with that. A lot at times. And I think that gave me more insight into myself. And then, in all honesty, even when I booked the assessment, I still thought to myself, this is definitely not going to be ADHD. But when I had the assessment and the clinician said to me, you present as a typical woman who has overcompensated and masked her entire life. So that was quite an insight for me.
Oh, wow, what a journey. And it's just fascinating, isn't it? And I think you know, this is one of the reasons we're having these talks,
Yeah.
is because people, women themselves, and a lot of the population just don't know what
Yeah.
it is. And the, like you say, the masking, covering up your true self takes a toll on your mental health.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people get diagnosed with depression and anxiety, don't they?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the gets missed.
Absolutely. I think as well, you know, when you don't, there's such a perception of ADHD, and obviously me having a boy who had it, who, you know, was kind of, he did all the typical things of the class clown and the, you know, silly noises and all that kind of thing that typically get associated with ADHD. I was never ever that person. I was very much the opposite of that, very conformist, made sure that I did what I had to do, very much a people pleaser, very much, you know, kind of kept myself doing that in order to kind of try to fit in. So it is completely the opposite. And I think it is really important for people to know that, you know, there's so many different presentations behind the scenes, all the kind of couldn't prioritize, couldn't organize, and that went all the way through school and that. But what I presented to the outside was very organized and structured and that kind of thing. So a lot of people kind of look at me now and go, really? That's, you know, they didn't see that. But yeah, it's just really interesting how it shows up.
Yeah, yeah. And you're, like you say, it's so different. And what's going on inside and what you look like on the outside are just so far apart. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's the extremes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now you know, what is for you?
I think having the kind of insight into yourself is brilliant. And, you know, it's only taken 50 years, but we're there anyway. Well, not there, but kind of getting there, having more insight. I think there's parts of you that kind of think, oh, if only I'd known this earlier, I could have, you know, managed better with that or had a lot less stress about something else. But I think what's good is I feel like I've found people that I can relate to really well. Other women who, you know, are ADHD, and when they talk about struggles that they have, you know, I don't feel like I have to cover that up anymore. And that for me is really, really liberating, because I can kind of go, oh, it's, you know, it's not me that's useless at that or whatever. This is part of ADHD. I still think it's really difficult at times, and there's certain conversations that I can have with certain people and not yet with others. And I think it takes a while, and, you know, it's far easier to talk to other ADHDers rather than just go and talk to anybody. But, you know, it's great that there's so much more awareness now, and there's conversations like this, and there's groups that you can be part of where it's very accepted. You're accepted as the person you are, and they look for your strengths as well as support what's difficult for you.
Yeah, yeah, great. Okay, so what are some of your strengths that, you know, that you could relate to ADHD?
Yeah, I still sometimes find that difficult to answer, in all honesty. I think probably I've always wanted to run my own business, and I've struggled. I have had a couple of businesses in the past which haven't been successful because of difficulties with organization, etc. I hope that one strength is that I've tried it again, because I knew that this is what I really wanted to do, and it has been difficult, but hopefully having that insight now, I'll be able to kind of address those difficulties. So I suppose that's a strength, in that I haven't given up on that and I've tried it again. You know, I think empathy is probably something that I would say I can, especially when I sort of talk to young people who are neurodivergent, or I can talk to their parents. I feel like I can really empathize with them, and I find that a strength, in that I can share my experiences with them. That's, you know, I think that's, they kind of say that's really helpful for them as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and like you say, you know, not giving up and going again with your own business because that was what you really wanted to do. That is a
yeah,
massive strength, isn't it? It could, you know, it could knock some people. So kind of that entrepreneurial spirit is
yeah.
very closely tied to ADHD, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, definitely. The more I learn about that, the more interesting that is.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, so have you got a funny story or a situation that where your ADHD has got you into trouble?
Yeah, there's probably a few of those. I think one which I always relate this to parents, and they always find this quite insightful. I don't know if it's so much funny, but it's kind of things that I look back on with Daniel. And gosh, when he was kind of 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever, and we tried reward charts and different schemes and different ways of kind of rewarding him for good behavior. This is before we understood, you know, what was going on. And the professionals were kind of all saying to us, oh, put a reward chart in place and have a reward at the end of it. Well, he and I used to devise the most amazing reward charts. We had ladders and all sorts of things. And then literally we could both keep it going for a day if we were lucky. And then we couldn't remember how it worked, or we forgot to do it, or so it's just, and at the time I used to really beat myself up and go, what is wrong with me? Do I really not want this? You know, and I used to get cross with him because he wouldn't be able to keep it up. But really, at the end of the day, it was my inconsistency. And looking back now, I fully understand that for me, that was just something that, you know, I couldn't keep going. I really struggled with that. And reward charts do not work in the least for most children, I would say, but absolutely not for neurodivergent young people. So when I tell that to parents, I think they're quite relieved in the fact that I can let them go, and you know, and the fact that I can kind of say I couldn't keep it up either. It was just ridiculous. And even when I was a teacher and working in a school, I always found that kind of thing difficult. I'd far rather sit down with a child and have a chat with them, and even tell them, you know, come back the next day, let's have another chat, let's work it out. But anything to do with, you know, some kind of system, I was not very good at. So I think that's been a real insight for me. And Danielle and I can laugh about it now. We look back on it and we go, oh, remember when we had that thing and then we lost the stickers and we couldn't remember what we were doing. It's so it's funny now. At the time, it wasn't quite so funny, but.
And, you know, a phrase you just said, you used to think, what's wrong with me?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
getting this system in place, which wasn't working for Daniel. And that's such a phrase that I've grown up with over my years, not anymore, but what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? And this is so common, isn't it?
definitely.
With late diagnosed or any diagnosed ADHD
Yeah, yeah.
folk.
And it doesn't just disappear when you have your diagnosis, does it? It takes a real shift of your perspective to let go of that, because I think you've been kind of living with that for, you know, 50 years or whatever it is. In my case, 50 years, and it's very ingrained to automatically think, well, I've done something wrong. What's wrong with me? So yeah, it's a difficult one to shift. And I almost think you kind of go through stages, and if you're feeling more confident within yourself and that, you can kind of go, no, it's not me, that's the ADHD, and I can support that. And then at other times, if you're feeling a bit lower, it's difficult to kind of get past that again, and it creeps up on you again.
Yeah, the creeping up really, because I feel I've come a long way, and then all of a sudden something will trigger something and it's
Yeah,
crept up again. But
yeah,
now with all this knowledge and experience, it's
yeah,
like, okay, this is what's happening, and it
yeah.
is unlearning, isn't it? And retraining.
Yes, definitely. And that understanding and self-awareness is just key, isn't it? It really makes a huge difference. I think that's the thing that needs to be passed on to our young people now, that they can gain that so much earlier than, you know, I gained it or you gained it. If they can have that self-awareness and that understanding. And that's why, you know, as much as labels, people talk about labeling your child and that kind of thing, and you would never want to do that in a negative way. but in all honesty, it saves that young person giving themselves much worse labels than an ADHD or autism or whatever it happens to be. They will label themselves in some way, and if you give them something concrete to work with, it can save them a lot of heartache, I think.
Absolutely. And yeah, I totally agree with you. And my answer to the labeling thing, oh, we don't want to give a label, or everyone wants a label these days, is, well, like you say, it's a reason. It's a better label than lazy, worthless,
absolutely,
stupid, you know. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a bugbear of mine. This, like you say, give them the language and the empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if somebody was diabetic or whatever they were physically, we'd happily give them that label in order to help them to understand what's going on and to help other people understand. It's just when it's something with the brain, it becomes it just takes on a different dimension, and I don't know why that should be like that. It's still something physical, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is around and they sometimes call it an invisible condition, don't they? Like you said earlier, it's from the outside, people think you're very capable, and of course we are in lots of ways. But that's why we're here doing this, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's also important to point out that it's the environment makes such a difference, and obviously our whole school environment, work environment is set up so much for neurotypical success, and those are the exact skills that often, or the exact traits that often the neurodivergent brain finds the most difficult. And it's not to say that they don't have other strengths and traits, but those particular ones are difficult for them. So it's always worth looking at how you can alter the environment, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes some really quick fixes with the environment as well
make a big difference, definitely.
Yeah. So what helps you with your kind of ADHD struggles?
I think for me, it's definitely about connecting with other people, definitely connecting with people who understand, women, some men as well that I've connected with. It's been really interesting hearing different perspectives, but I think just making those connections and speaking to other people and being able to share with them honestly and openly has made a massive difference for me. I do take medication as well, so I would say that that's made a difference. That's still being kind of tweaked and worked out what exactly is right. And I know there's a lot of, people have a lot of thoughts and a lot of opinions about medication. But for me, I would say if it's something that helps you, then I don't see any reason not to take it. Everybody's entitled to their own opinions, and different people deal with it in different ways. But the medication definitely helps Daniel, and I've seen an improvement with that as well. And I think it's just, like we've said, the self-awareness and putting those strategies in place. I'm pretty good at working out what I should be doing. I'm not quite as good as actually taking the action and doing it. So that's where I can improve.
Yes, absolutely. And it's all very well saying, oh yeah, we can do this, this will help, but it almost needs to be broken down even further, doesn't it? So that it becomes something that becomes part of your life, whether that's, for me, for example, if I make an appointment with someone, I have to put it in my calendar right there, right then. Gone. So yes, appointments in calendars, but the extra rule, right away.
Yes.
It's not going to happen.
No,
and people are like on Zoom going, where are you? I'm like, what? It's not in the calendar. You're not.
It can't be happening. I think it's working out what suits you as well. And I think, it's brilliant to hear all the advice. And then, like you say, you break it down and you take away what works for you. And once you find that thing that works for you, you just keep going with it. And I think almost you lose other people's judgments of that. Which someone like me who always lived by what other people were going to think about it is really tough. But I think when you find that thing that supports you, you can kind of go, I don't care what anybody else thinks, this works for me. I'm going to keep doing it.
So important. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up as well. What works for me may not work for you.
Yeah,
What works for you may not work for someone else. So it's
yeah,
it's great to get hints and tips.
yeah,
Ultimately, it's trial and error, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, Shelley, to finish then, what piece of advice would you give to somebody that's just been diagnosed and is a bit lost?
I probably would say one thing is give yourself time to process it. Don't think that just getting that diagnosis is going to make you think differently about things. I think it's very much a roller coaster kind of journey. And I saw a thing on Facebook the other day, which almost puts the journey after you get your ADHD diagnosis. They equated it to like a journey of grief kind of thing. So there's the anger, then there's the grief, etc., etc. And then the kind of fifth pillar was acceptance, and you get on with your life. And I think it's a lot more complex than that. I think there's a lot more kind of you accept it some days or in certain ways, and then there's other things that you find really difficult. And then, you know, you've talked to different people and you feel one way about it, and then things creep up on you like we talked about. I think it's just it's a complicated journey. There's a lot of unlearning to do if it's a late diagnosis. And the thing that I find really difficult to do, but which I definitely say is really important, is to just be kind to yourself and show yourself compassion. And, you know, just register the fact that you have masked or you have lived with this for a long time. And, you know, it will just, if we can feel authentically ourselves and we can be authentically ourselves, I think that's going to be the way forward. And I think society as a whole has a lot of changing to do, but every person that adopts that kind of way of thinking and speaks out about the ADHD and is honest and open about it, that stigma is chipped away at bit by bit. So, you know, don't feel that you know it's always going to be this way. I think there's going to be big changes, and with everybody becoming more aware, there's going to be big changes in the next few years. So
Thank you so much, Shelley. What you've shared has been absolutely fantastic, and I know it's going to help a lot of people getting your perspective and your journey. So thank you so much.
you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.